I'm Parker Finley. I'm the symposium director this year. I'm so excited to be moderating this super interesting panel. This is one of the topics when we were thinking about how to explore the relationship between technology and music and art. This is one of the topics I really wanted to get into, and I'm so excited to be doing it with these four amazing folks on stage. I'm going to introduce them. So, Vincent Morrisset is the founder of the studio À Trois. He collaborated with Arcade Fire, Sigur Rós, and Skrillex. Morrisset also created the genre-defying interactive pieces Blah Blah, Way to Go, Vast Body, Motto, and Composition. The projects have been featured at Sundance, Venice Days, TIFF, the Japan Media Arts Festival, IDFA, and South by Southwest. Next, we have Jon Yu. Jon Yu is the founder and CEO of Mythology, a relational design and creative research studio, an interdisciplinary neuroscientist, filmmaker, and digital artist. He and his team are developing Elysium, a no-code XR creation toolkit and real-time world-building platform. His purpose is in democratizing technology while empowering creativity. Next, we have Ali Kays. I wrote these in the wrong order. Ali is a multidisciplinary visual artist, artistic, and animation director living and working in Montreal. Ali has 22 years of experience in analog, digital, virtual, and immersive storytelling, and he's a lecturer in film animation and VFX. Ali has studied visual arts, computer science, and visual effects for film production. And last but certainly not least, we have Ghassan Fayad, who's a creative producer and technologist. In 2005, he founds Kung Fu, is that how you say it? Kung Fu, a Montreal-based digital agency whose work in the digital media and entertainment and cultural industries has often been praised. He collaborated on many international innovative projects at the intersection of technology and storytelling, and has been a guest lecturer and panelist at universities and conferences such as South by Southwest, Hot Docs, FNC, RIDM, MIP, this is a lot of spelling this morning, and BANF. Please welcome our panelists.
Thank you.
Cool. I don't want to take up any more time. I want to get into these really cool projects. So Vincent, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So just to set the table, I will just present you a couple of projects we've done lately. So are we switching chairs so I can?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yes, let's do that. And okay, I open this one. Voila. So the first project I wanted to present you was a collaboration with a beat maker called V-Looper. He worked with Ken Lo, À la Claire Ensemble, hip-hop artists from Quebec City. And we had the opportunity to do a residency at the Phi Center. And the idea was to revisit a bit the ritual about how we engage with music and change a bit the parameter on who is the audience, who is creating the music, and how we relate to sound. So during this residency, we wanted to create a project that was a hybrid between a miniature theater, a musical score, and kind of an instrument and a sculpture. And basically, you're invited to play or move cubes on a table, and depending on how you arrange them, you kind of transform what you see, the miniature world, but also the music. And the idea was, the challenge, I would say, was to kind of create tension where anything could sound good. So even an audience that is not, or that are not musician, would be able to kind of have satisfying outcome. So but still have a kind of a really kind of a clear cause and effect and a control over what they would do. So the idea is really to kind of explore, experiment with those objects and really have a physicality through it, and kind of a bit of a way to imagine what could be augmented reality or mixed reality without a headset. So this is just tracking and mapping, video mapping, but we made it so that we create illusions of casting light and different things. So this is an example of. We don't see it really, really well on the back, but we have those cubes that some people manipulate, and depending how they stack them or move them, it kind of transforms the music. So Vilooper developed this kind of vocabulary. He never worked on generative or interactive music. So it's a computer with, we have two computer, one that use the computer vision and the visuals, another one with Ableton controlled by MIDI, and so we're triggering virtual instruments so that the music is dynamic. And what we did also at that residency was like to imagine that those cubes are not cubes anymore, but human in a venue, so that the audience in a venue could become the musical score. And there was something quite satisfying about having the timeline hit your feet and kind of generate beats. This is another project we did that still use computer vision and like kind of a lack of device, so just your body. And we invited the dancers to kind of map and distill the human body and try to make as many variations with their arms and torso and head. And with millions of photography, we basically trained a system that would kind of match every posture and match it in real time. So in this installation, we're basically becoming tons of different people. So we're dancing. So like the people that we invited were from different background, hip hop, Sufi dance, ballet, whacking. But then you infuse to them your own personality and engaging with other into a video installation. And this is the last project I wanted to show. It's called Moto. It's a mobile project, and it was a collaboration with a novelist from the neighborhood. His name is Sean Michael. He won the Giller Prize a couple of years ago. And in this project, it's kind of it's a ghost story that you read a bit like stories, and you're invited to shoot little fragments of video, and these videos are becoming part of the kind of book/film project. So it's another take on what augmented reality could be, just kind of engaging with your environment. You can do this project in your home, in walking on Saint Laurent. It was designed to work anywhere in the world, and all the little video that you upload become part of that large collection. So these are three really different projects, but I thought were kind of interesting to add to this conversation about what is interactivity and the relationship that we can have with experience.
Cool. Wow. Before you leave the hot seat, we will have time for questions from the audience, but I actually wonder if any of the panelists, maybe we can do it this way after each person talks, if anyone on here has a question for Vincent. Sorry, I'm really putting you on the spot, but
You were not ready for that, huh?
yeah.
What was the biggest lesson that you learned between all three projects? What was the common thread that you found between all three projects? Because they're all very different. Mm-hmm. I love that they're all super playful and engaging for the public. But was there something that you learned in putting this out in the field and seeing how people interacted with it?
I think this is kind of a lesson like that that evolve over time of 20 years of doing interactivity, but it's the fact that you're constantly surprised of how people will use, transform, kind of subverse or try to break the system, and that's where I guess the beauty and the poetry emerge. So they kind of give a bit of space for these kind of a bit of the chaos and the creativity of the people. And like for instance, Vast Body, like it's kind of a bit robust system that make you kind of detect what you do, but then like a lot of people try to play with it together, and then it became this kind of different piece that was almost breaking, but that kind of evolved into something else. It's also like the beauty of collaborating with other medium, and I think this panel is about that, about collaborating with musicians or another. And on this project, I collaborated with Shawn Michaels, with Louise Le Cavalier, who's a dancer that knows nothing about technology. Like even email is complicated for her. And V-Looper is a kind of classic beat maker, and it was this kind of interesting encounter from two, people working with people that are totally clueless about technology, but that kind of encounter was rich and kind of bring us outside of the tech mindset. So that was a lesson to kind of open up into these kind of pure collaboration.
I don't have a question. I like the way you, especially for the first project, I like the way you put the audience at the center of the action, which I see as something very interesting. And the way they were, how you moved from the cubes on the table, and the cubes became the audience. That's very beautiful.
It was something interesting about how the people are kind of formatted in their brain. At first, they kind of approach the table as a sequencer or kind of a software, and was like, okay, and try to analyze, like, okay, if I put this, if I turn the cube, like the Bjork reactable, and then it's like, oh no, it doesn't do anything. So we kind of dumbed out the project, and then there is a point after a minute or two that they let go and they get out of their head and become part of the project, and then like, what? And then they just kind of mess around and play and just throw cubes to the other, and then they become one with the piece, and that's where it, but when they are kind of more and as a user interface, you're more in your head, and that was a bit of the process of the residency, was that, to kind of change the mindset.
Awesome, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's do another musical chairs, and then we'll get Jon to do next. Maybe Vincent, you sit here, just to not make this too complicated for Kai doing sound.
Sorry.
Yeah, perfect.
So I'm just gonna show a little video. I was putting this together just came up on stage. This is just a little montage of some of the experiments that we did with Elysium this summer. Elysium is a no-code platform for creation. Basically, my goal in creating Elysium was to democratize AR as a new medium, and so let's just take a look at what that looks like. That's it?
Liz, you gave me like a night when we met about this panel. You walked me through like a 20-minute like demo of the app, and I think that was a really cool like preview of it. But there's like so many cool features of it. Can you like talk about some of the like a few examples of like what you can actually set up and how that relates to like an experience that an artist or an organization could set up?
Okay, I mean, really what our app allows people to do is take digital media, whether it's a 3D object, a PNG, or whatever, audio file, and then place it in the real world so that it's spatialized. It's actually localized to a specific place, so you put it here in the room and knows exactly where it is in the room. You're going to come back in 5 years, it's still going to be here. So it's a way to share, well, your content. But also, it's another way to reimagine how you present that content in a structured way. So, you know, a lot of, you know, AR has been around. We have face filters. We have a lot of, you know, try-on shoes and things like that. But what's really missing, I found, as a filmmaker, was this ability to tell stories through these worlds. I also play video games. So it's, for me, it's kind of like a intersection between gamification, exploration, and what you know, some people call spatial storytelling, right? So, you know, we actually just released the app on the App Store about a month and a half ago, and so right now we're just putting it out there, testing it out, and playing with it. But the long vision for us is to build a tool that anybody can use. Anybody can have, whether you just work in Photoshop or whatnot, you can drag and drop assets. There's tons of libraries of things that you can do. You can bring that in, and you just start building a world, whether it's, you know, on any subject you like. But you know, the idea is to kind of craft a world that you can bring somebody to kind of like be in your shoes, right? And in terms of how we see this being used by people, well, you know, low-hanging fruit would be promotional materials, ways to share you know, your marketing for your show or something like that. But I mean, I think there's a really untapped potential to discover this as a whole new medium. In the same way that video is just an extension of photos, this is an extension of the existing media that we have in a very interactive way. So the next step for us is that we have this way of building these worlds out. Now what we're doing is, what's really exciting is that we're building ways to bring this world into, and allow people to code interactive elements inside these spaces. So you can tap on something, it will move around, you can tap on something, or something else will happen somewhere else. The way our system works is that we define spaces in the world, and then within these spaces you have these experiences. But what's really nice about it is that once you place it in the world, they all become interconnected. So you can then create rules around how these things interact with each other and interact with people. And then the next phase of that, what's even more exciting, is the ability to bring in you know, physical effects. And what I mean by that is we're working with some partners right now to develop ways where, well, we already have it working, we just need some kind of case use, where we can interact with something in augmented reality. Right now it's through your phone or mobile device, but you can interact with something and turn off the lights in your house. You can press a button in your house and trigger something to happen in augmented reality. So we're trying to bridge the separation that exists between the physical and the digital. And similar to, you know, what Vincent's work is done, I feel like has a very strong element of play. I think my goal is to create a tool that allows people access to this new medium, that allows them to really play and experiment without feeling that they have to achieve anything, right? So, you know, one of our more important testers are kids, right? We want to see them use it, we want to see how they use it, and get feedback on how they can play with the medium. And recently we did a exhibition at Mapping Montreal, which is a projection mapping festival here in Montreal. And you know, I actually just started creating things on the fly. And I found that to be a very fun way to engage with a concert that was happening on the location, right? So I was able to impress a little bit of my own experience into this world, and I can share that with people through video or through other mediums that, you know, more traditional mediums. So, you know, we're trying to develop interesting ways to use this. We've built a tool that kind of can do a lot of different things, And so right now, where we're at is we're reaching out to creators. We want to talk to artists, musicians, and see what can come out of this. One idea that we had is very similar to what Vincent was doing with the musical blocks, is that we want to create spaces where audio is reactive. And the idea is that you can occupy a space in any location.
Just talk a little closer to the mic.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, so I think, I think what this tool, that we hope this tool allows, is that creators such as the people on the panel today can use this to kind of, explore the themes of their work and take it to the next level. I personally see this as another extension to the internet. In the same way that we can explore, learn, play, engage with people, connect with people on the internet, we can do that in the real world now. And what's interesting about augmented reality is that it brings together people, places, and information.
Awesome, thanks so much. Do any of the panelists have questions?
Yeah. Thank you for presenting, interesting. Do you think that, to what extent you can actually put all these elements into an interactive situation? Did you try to test it with the students? Who's really like your audience for this? For example, let's take an example like a class at school. They take the app. How many multiple players can join one space at the same time and create and build an interactive narrative or storytelling at the same time, adding music, whatever, like components to it. That would be interesting.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's something that we're trying to tackle right now, right? Is to enable multiplayer play. Right now, what happens is that I can create something and it syncs to the cloud in real time, and if you open your phone, you can see it. But what's actually happening is that we're creating a multiverse, right? It's a branch of your reality. Your reality is then different from mine, but we're working with technical partners to develop ways that we can quite easily do collaborative building, because that's where I think the real fun comes in, right? Imagine you can build worlds together, right? So I think that's something that really to date no other platform has really enabled yet. So we're looking to be, that's definitely a target for us.
Yeah, excuse me. Do you know if Pokemon Go was also a multiplayer platform? It was just like a single person playing and interacting without having the ability to affect the story and the elements, etc.
You know what? I didn't ever play Pokemon Go all that much, but from what I understand is that the experience itself is siloed, meaning that the AR experience is only on your singular device. Yeah. It may be that your world is connected to other people through data, right, yeah. on a database somewhere, but living the experience in the moment is still a singular experience. Mm-hmm. So that's something that we want to, we're working with partners such as C2 to develop tools that we can then do collaborative building. Off the top of my mind, it's just like giant Lego blocks, right? Yeah. You can move giant Lego blocks and build something together. That's just a lot of fun,
Yeah, I'm also really kind of fascinated about that potential. And personally, one of the, and I would be curious to hear you about it, is the gateway to there, like the fact you need to install an app, and like if there's people here and you want them to engage with the project, is there a way to kind of simplify that that kind of the moment they're in a space through the AR experience? Is there?
Well, right now in the AR ecosystem, you have app-based AR and appless AR. Appless AR is basically web AR. Mm-hmm. You're limited to the kind of quality and tracking and the amount of memory and everything, the hardware requirements. Really, the biggest barrier to this medium is the hardware, right? So even our beta right now doesn't work on all devices. Doesn't mm-hmm. work on basically any iPhone older than iPhone 8. Okay. And we're also seeing that there's a lot of usability challenges because a lot of people don't, they're just really messy with their apps. They just never close their apps, right? So there's, you know, if they have a lapse open in the background, they may not be able to go into AR. So these are challenges for sure. But I think where we're trying to figure things out with creators is to target specific situations where they go into an experience knowing that there's something to be experienced.
Yeah.
Right. So I think music festivals, concerts are great avenues for that because people are going there, they're paying to go have a fun experience. And, you know, sometimes, you know, depending on the situation, maybe downloading an app is less of a barrier.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's kind of our approach to that right now. But, you know, we essentially what we've done is built a back-end system to host all of this data.
Yep.
So our hope is that in the future, the hardware not only improves, but even the way that the technology is delivered changes. And then the requirements will naturally kind of like lower the barriers to access.
Cool. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
We'll talk more. But you brought up the metaverse, and that's definitely on my list of questions to ask about. But we'll come back to it after we get to these two. So who's up first? Hassan's first.
And you stay there.
You move to. I'll move there.
If it's difficult, I'll move.
I'm just gonna leave the microphone behind.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'll shift over.
We switch.
Here we are.
Yeah, actually, that's it.
Full-on musical chairs.
Okay.
How many tech geniuses does it take to figure out our chair setup? Yeah.
Yeah, so just a little bit of context before diving in. Born to Leave. So yeah, we've been I've been working in narrative, interactive, digital experiences for quite some time. Started really as web-based stuff. Really, I remember the days where Vincent also was doing interactive video clips, and we were also in that, like we did a few experiments there with NFB in early 2010.
We're old.
Yeah, getting old. And gradually, I mean, as I guess the immersive media types kind of evolved, it was a natural extension to kind of dive into VR, AR, XR, immersive installations, etc. But I just wanted to say that somehow, like the little web interactive narrative stuff is kind of a precursor to a lot of things that came after, as technology made them more accessible. But this is more of a web-based experience I'm going to talk about, and it's called Born to Leave. Actually, Ali was a huge part of that project, so feel free to intervene in my presentation. And it started with a very tight collaboration with Wake Island, the band, whose album, with the same title, Born to Leave, was released. And one of the themes of the album was their kind of relationship as immigrants, as exiled from Lebanon, and this kind of like difficult relationship they had with the country. And maybe you guessed it, but Ali and I are Lebanese, so that's what kind of brought us together, or brought together the initial team behind the project, was to kind of turn this album into, it was a very open kind of a mandate, but to turn this album into an interactive experience. And so we're going to show some early, or not early. We started the project with the pandemic, and it's about ready to be released very soon. So these are making of kind of moments, but the project is not yet published yet. Yeah. Essentially, we started by kind of deconstructing the album and going with each track and like saying, okay, how can we, like, it's a big challenge to kind of adapt an album for the web. It's huge. But in the end, like I'm just showing some outtakes, but in the end, the album also evolved because each track was kind of rewritten for the web experience and was changed for the web experience. And of course, we had to kind of keep in mind, or keep in touch with the aesthetic of the band, which is very 80s, 90s, kind of a bit retro, kind of stylistically. And we did a mix of different mediums, I guess, from video to animation to very old school kind of text-based interactive games. So we shot the guys on green screen, but we also created their digital avatars, mix of like photogrammetry and modeling and rigging in 3D. So Phil and Nadim, the band members, have been generated in 3D as 3D avatars. Currently for the web-based, I mean, that sets the stage actually to make them completely interactive characters in a real-time environment. But for now, this project, we use that for animation in this iteration of the project. Yeah, those are the avatars. And these are some extra excerpts from the animated moments of the experience. And what's really actually cool about the project, okay, so again, emotionally, what was happening, that there was the pandemic, we were confined here, and Beirut was exploding and collapsing in front of our eyes. So we were all emotionally very touched by this project. Like when Phil approached us, it was like, yeah, hey, you know, we want to collaborate on this project. I want to be kind of the voice of the Lebanese Montreal creative community, and I want to involve everybody on board, including Bea also, who worked on all the film side. But the situation in Lebanon kept like collapsing throughout the project. So it was very charged emotionally to work on this. And we kind of ended up building a story. As a side note, we used Twine, which is a very old school little editor to write nonlinear or branched narratives. And Phil and Nadim totally geeked out on Twine and built this like, this is the narrative of the project right here on the right side. And they created a story about arriving to Montreal Trudeau Airport and dealing with the customs as immigrants and having to answer the right answers to get in the country or be rejected from entering Canada, etc. And we turned this whole thing into a very mixed media experience that is gonna look a bit like this. Yeah, so it was really actually a very fun process because everybody was involved together. I was thinking before the panel of, you know, all the projects where, of course, when you're talking about narrative or immersive projects, music and sound is a huge component of it. But rarely did I have the opportunity to actually create together so tightly this whole world. Like everybody had a very wide sandbox to bring in their ideas. And we had in common this kind of like Lebanese kind of origin. And we just had fun and just, you know, everything was open, everything was allowed, and yeah, it's gonna be online soon. By the end of the year. By the end of the year, we're like really fine tuning right now.
That's awesome. I also think it's fascinating that the project started with the music first.
Yes.
Because I feel like that doesn't often happen in these kinds of
absolutely
things.
Well, so again, coming to this panel, I was like, okay, how many projects was the music really at the starting seed, not the other way around, where you bring on board sound designers to kind of design music around the experience? Not a lot. But what's interesting in this case is that the album was the starting point, but then every track of the album was rewritten because of the process we went through. So Phil and Nadim kind of remixed every track, and like it's original music. In the end, it's not exactly the track that's on the album, but it's inspired, or it's a reconstructed track for each of the tracks of the album.
Is the project will be released in conjunction with the album? Do you
No.
see it as a promotional project, or more kind of a collaboration, original work, or it's a bit of both?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the album has been out,
Okay.
but now we're talking about all those remixed tracks that they created for the experience might be released as their own kind of piece. So there might be some kind of musical release attached to this. But in the end, it's an interesting question, and I don't necessarily have, we don't necessarily have the final answer, but Born to Leave, the web version, this is the experience that's gonna come up. And then when you search Born to Leave on Spotify, or you're gonna fall on the album. Yeah. So they kind of work together. And one drives to the other, I guess. You know, there's a symbiosis between the two, and there's going to be original tracks coming from the interactive experience. But we weren't thinking about it as necessarily as a marketing tool, more than an adaptation. That was kind of like at least the creative process that we were going through. Yeah.
Yeah, I would like just to, I remember something because when you just mentioned that the album, the songs were rewritten actually specifically for this web experience, which means they ended up really with new material that is not the album anymore, and you could say it was derivated from the album, but when you get into the experience, you feel that that's something new, different, total different, that started conceptually from the same origin and the same discussions and visual and sound discussions and experience discussions that they happened at the beginning, but and now they're going into a new, also a new chapter, which also thinking about where to put the audience at the center of all of this together, and going into more cross-reality experiences, because the material that we have is tons of content and interactive kind of material that you could put into action. So I had a feeling that we created a small group of a small research group here, and it's going constantly into trying more and more experiments with the time. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, you just made me think that, you know, those 3D avatars that we created are assets actually for the next projects. You know, like now that, and it's, I mean, it is a process, you know, to actually scan them and create the rigs, and it's costly. And now that they exist as avatars, there's a whole world of possibilities that opened up, as in, okay, they can use them in shows and live performance, in maybe AR, VR, etc.
Alec Baldwin.
Yeah. So that kind of came out of the project and wasn't necessarily, you know, the initial goal, but but we were like, yeah, now we're gonna write a new project with the same. We're using these assets for other stuff.
I don't know if this is a left field question, but are the rights to use the digital avatars a complicated, like, thing, or is it simple?
It's a new territory.
It's a new territory. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm answering your question exactly, but I was.
Like, could someone outside your project use the digital avatars that you've created for this project?
Yeah, so just, I mean, maybe an anecdote aside, like a personal anecdote that happened to me on another project, but that was a few years ago. So really, photogrammetry scanning of a human was very expensive. And so we found this company that would do it for us. Now it's much more democratic, like you can do it with an iPhone more almost, but you still need professional 3D artists. But we found this company that would do it for us, but the condition was that we release the resemblance of the model, because they were going to use it in their model database. And, you know, we had an actress that was the character in our story, and there was no way. Her agent was like, well, I mean, we were also ethically, we cannot allow, like they were okay signing that it wouldn't be used for a McDonald's ad or for porn or for certain uses, but still releasing your resemblance and making it available for any buyer was ethically a big question, and we canceled it. We didn't do it in the end. Yeah. But in this case, we own. I mean, we own. The band owns their avatars. Yeah.
Cool. I find that really fascinating. Whole other panel about that. Great. Should we move on to yours?
Yeah. Thank you. Hello. So I just want to give a quick overview about what I do. Actually, I don't create my projects solo. I join and I collaborate with other creative people on their projects mainly. That's what I do. So I worked for a long time for linear industry, like working for film, for art industry. And in 2017, I came to Montreal and I started collaborating on immersive kind of projects, mainly like stuff, fiction experiences or narratives, maybe also kinds of documentary, and I collaborated a lot, still collaborating with Kung Fu. Also, we worked on immersive theater VR version project. And right now we're working on 2 projects, other than Born to Live together. And but I would like to talk about this one because it's the first kind of, it's one of the first directions that I started working on recently. So the project is named Mortis Domum, and it's a collaboration between a musician, 2 choreographers, one creative developer or technologist, and I joined it not from the beginning actually. So the project was and still in residency at SAT, and I joined at a later stage as an artistic director. At the beginning, it took me a lot of time to understand what I should do as an artistic director with this project. But then I understood that I'm not there just to beautify some colors here and etc. It's more to think about the narrative from a linear and interactive perspective and understand the relationships between all the components of the project that I'm gonna explain now. So I joined Zach, Peter, Osman, Alida, and the project will be on show at Immersive Festival on 15th of October, in 2 weeks from now. This is the research phase of the project. It's a research, I would say, kind of artistic and technological research at the same time. Led by all of these people working together, and everyone coming from different backgrounds and trying to understand the different languages together. It's a hybrid space, I would say, and Mortis Domum means in Latin the space or house of movement or motion. So the project is about trying to create relationships between a physical space, which is in our case and this research, the physical space of the dome at the SAT, and which is the real space, and at the same time the real physical, local also, where we have a choreographer moving and sometimes not moving, and a system of a sound that is a specialized sound that is put into the place. And there's another space, actually, part of this hybrid space, which is a remote choreographer dancing and motion tracked using Kinect. Also, not just the local one. And both of the motions are transformed into avatars in the virtual world, which is the third component of this hybrid space together. So it's built between local and remote, real and virtual at the same time, and 2 choreographers and 1 physical sound system, but also 1 6DoF system in the virtual world. And they all interact and trigger each other's and react to each other in an experiment that is a research ongoing experiment. But also not only that, but it's also about the relationship of light in the physical space and the shadow in the virtual space. For example, what happens when a choreographer move as a remote performance choreographer person and impacts the shadow of the avatar in a virtual space, etc. Now, that's all of it is kind of an experiment, but at the same time, it's not just a technological experiment, it's an artistic, highly artistic experiment. And that what interested me actually and made me really interested in joining this group of talented people in order to work with them. I'm very interested as an art director in these relationships and how our impression as real people is imprinted in the, I would say imprinted in the virtual space, how long it lasts. Is it dependent on our movement in the real world? What if when we stop moving, what happens? Does it fade or does it continue and stay alone and live forever, for example, etc.? These kinds of questions that we're trying to answer by triggering all these relationships together. So I'm gonna show you an old video that was recorded before I joined.
I had a little trouble following the narrative from where I was sitting, but I think where you guys were sitting was just a bit better.
Well, I'm in AI, so I actually just walk around whenever I wanted. So that was kind of my point of view.
Are you that crazy white line squiggling around sometimes?
Oh, Peter, hey, how's it going? I hear you fine. How's it going? How was the show?
Well, I guess that's me and maybe someone else.
Sorry, I'm gonna stop it. Excuse me, I stopped it because it's a long one, and now they end talking about the relationship of the local and remote audience. And that was part of the research that they started before I joined. And when I discussed it with them, they said, okay, we did the research about how could we have a remote audience, like today, for example, you have a remote audience. And they said that they tried hard and they created an AR app also for that, and they worked, Peter and Osman, on this, but then when the pandemic faded out a little bit, they felt that they don't want to go with this, and they wanted to bring back the audience to the theater space. So I think this is also something interesting, like to think about and to see how the phases are changing, and what is interesting to have as what are the experiences that you really need the audience at the center of them, and what are the experiences that you can keep developing a remote audience for, etc. So yeah, that opens up another discussion. So that's the project quickly in a nutshell. That's that's the app. Yeah, so I'm not gonna talk about it. And thank you.
Great. Do any of you have questions?
Yes, I really find this kind of premise fascinating about like the be in a place and have other people, and for me one of the thing I think often is how to make people feel that, for instance, like the dancer that was on it at the other room. This could be baked, right? Like it could, because it's on paper. Actually, there's a real person on the other side, but this could be completely fake. So how do you make it feel that it's really a person?
Yeah, actually, the part of the performance of the choreographers is real time, but some of it is staged actually. But at the same time, because I didn't show the full narrative or the full experiment here, but at a certain moment, Peter, who's at local space, he rejoined the space because he's from somewhere else, just in order to validate actually part of your question. And also at a certain moment, when they joined together, the two performers physically at the dome, and when they are together there, then the avatars are detached from their bodies, and they become interacting separately. The virtual avatars separate from the two physical performers. So it was staged in that sense, just to see all the cycles of the experiment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
I had a question about how you guys integrated sound in the performance.
When Eve asked me to join, I felt like I know nothing about sound. So I don't know how to speak about sound. So what I know actually is the less technical, because I've never worked technically with sound, but I understand from the system that Osman, the creative technologist, built, is the sound is triggered in the virtual space by the movement in the physical space. But at the same time, when you have like a 6DoF sound, usually in VR, you put a headset and you listen to this experience of spatialized sound. But one of the other projects that Peter, who's the sound designer and musician who worked on, that's another project, was to translate the 6DoF sound from the virtual space into the physical space. So if you saw one of the videos, the sound, the 360 sounds, he used these 60 sounds in order to respecialize the 6DoF sound into the physical. And that's another project he worked on actually. And I found it fascinating, but it's something outside of my understanding also.
Yeah, because I think the suggestion I see from that is, you were talking about how to make the audience feel a virtual projection feel like a presence, right? To feel a physical reaction to that. And often I find it's very understated how powerful sound and audio is in that regard. I watch sports. I don't know if you guys watch sports, but like sometimes they put the mic in the sports, the athlete's helmet or something like that, or hockey. It creates a whole other level of intimacy, of experience, which it's just the breathing sometimes or something like that, but it's very subtle cues like that that make you feel that somebody is there. And I think, yeah, I was just wondering if that was something that was considered in the process, but.
The system exists actually. Now, I didn't see how far they went with experimenting in this specific project, but they used it from the other project, what they built as a relationship between the virtual and physical sound, spatializing in the physical space. And that was, I've watched the experience. Like, for example, the other one, if you go and step in a position in the virtual space, then you get closer to the sound at that specific position, and then this activates the sound surrounding you and makes you feel that you are physically there, but you're here. So this relationship, I felt it from the work, but actually that layer wasn't the main research here, I felt, no.
I found that we're kind of lucky to have had the chance to be in these kind of residency at FI, at SAT, and I think the beauty of having this kind of playground and inviting people from different backgrounds is then also you have a context to present it, right? It's like these weird projects, like where do we present these? And I think SAT and FI, actually you try, experiment with something, and then you have a context to present it, and people buy tickets, and that I think is quite precious. Like, you will present this experimentation in 2 weeks, I will come. I'm really curious.
I'm also presenting on their behalf, and suddenly, like, I felt like I'm very involved in the project that they started. But
yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, thanks.
Great. We're actually kind of running out of time. Yeah, but this was also fascinating, so I'm glad that we've talked about it. But I just wanted to see if there's anyone in the audience who wants to ask a question. And if you do, we have a little microphone over there. But does anyone in the audience have a question for the panelists? Yeah, Jen. At this point, we're permitted.
Hello. My question is really just kind of aimed towards musicians or other artists who might be here or watching online that are absolutely fascinated but know nothing.
Yeah.
So, because I think that's a lot of people that I meet and talk to. What kind of advice would you give to artists who really see kind of a barrier? Like, it does seem sometimes very inaccessible. What would be like some ideas to kind of enter into this domain?
Like, I would say, like some initiative, as you do, kind of try to democratize. I think there is some technical solution that democratize and make it easier to kind of hack or transform and make it your own. And for me personally, what I found is that it's just kind of a genuine relationship with people like us, and just to connect with people that have a bit of these kind of expertise, and then start and collaborate and develop a project. I think there's two ways to approach it, either like DIY and start from the solution, or like instead, like I personally always try to see what is the potential of a technology or a medium, and then build on that, because it's a medium that can be kind of frustrating, because, as you say, there's a lot of barrier and a knowledge curve that can be difficult. But if you start kind of smaller, kind of from an angle, and make it your own, it can be, you can make some mileage. And the other way is just to kind of like, it's kind of, these are the best project. Like, I've collaborated with music artists like many times, and this is kind of always fruitful collaboration. So I think it's also like, don't be shy to kind of connect with people like us.
Yeah, I think you've all mentioned at some point, you've worked with artists who are not familiar with the technology side of these things, right?
Yeah, I was going to just, building on that. I mean, as I was saying, I think in immersive medium, like, sound is such an integral, a huge part of the immersion. I mean, just like even before, film score or video games all need sound, and in immersive, they even more need sound. But there's so much also technological R&D that sound is not. I mean, the visual side and the interactive side cost much more in the production because they involve developers and 3D artists and animators, et cetera, But in the actual emotional part of the experience, sound is at least as much weight, has as much weight as the interactive visual side of it. So there's a lot of need for musicians and sound designers in the process. But what I wanted to add is that I find, though, at least a lot of musicians are very geeky in nature. Like there's something about liking gear and tools, and that, I don't know, it's a lot of times it's natural for them. I mean, there's a lot of R&D in this field for sure, but a lot of musicians are comfortable. Like with Phil and Nadim, they were like, we handed them Twine and they started writing this like non-linear script and like totally exploding the narrative. And it was just natural to I think it might be natural to a lot of musicians. I don't know.
Yeah.
No, go ahead. I was just going to say that I think it's also a win-win about the distribution aspect. Sometimes what we do is it's kind of a niche, but having an audience that is craving for content, they will do the extra step to kind of live that kind of novel experience. So as these kind of XR or interactive creators, we open up to a larger kind of craving audience, and on the other side, we open up other channel of distribution or context to them. For instance, like being presented in a Venice festival or at Side by Southwest in another program. So there's this kind of both kind of nourish each other and opens different channels. So I feel that they kind of it's kind of a good for both sides.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, because Vincent was saying, you have to start somewhere with small experiments at the beginning, because you'd never understand, like, going fast to something lot complex technically. That's very true. I come from film industry, animation, 2D, 3D for film. I do visual arts, etc., installations. I worked with theater a lot, but classic linear theater, not with technology. And when I tried to switch and started, for example, with Ghassan, and in 2018, 17, not so long ago, and at the beginning I felt that I'll have to do everything myself. I have to think and understand every technological aspect myself. But it turned out that I'm part of a group, and I'm not going to handle everything. I'm going to share the knowledge and try to understand the medium and its capabilities and what I need from it. So it's not that like you're switching to something that means that you have really to do everything about it. You'll take your part, but collaboration is key here. There's no way you do these kind of projects. Like the era of multidisciplinary person has gone. Not just, it's multidisciplinary team now. That's what I believe in.
And I also think that, as a technologist or an engineer or somebody that's building a technology, it's your responsibility to make it accessible, right? It's your responsibility to, allow other people to access that technology. So, some similar to a lot of the approaches that we've seen on the projects today, I think it's about, making the technology invisible. Right? The idea is that creativity comes in just kind of going out and playing around with it, trying different things. And I think that's where we want, the engagement from other creatives from other fields, right? I think all of these immersive tech is inherently multidisciplinary, right? So I think the value is that there are basically untapped possibilities here. And, the only way to discover this is truly trial and error. And the best way forward for us as anybody that's developing a technique or a tech or an experience is to just invite people to come in and play, right? And so, you know, for my specific example, like we try to dumb it down as simple as possible, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but that's the design challenge, right? We want to design for play in spaces. So I think, you know, all these fantastic projects that we've seen today have an element of that where we're inviting the audience to participate. And like it was just said, I think that opens up, you know, eventually the idea for new revenue streams, new ways of presenting existing materials. You know, music doesn't have to exist in a hall. It can be played out in the world, right? It can be displayed in different ways. And so, you know, I think all of these technologies are looking for, you know, different avenues to be for musicians or sound artists to kind of show their work.
Great. On that note, we're out of time. Can you please join me in giving a warm thank you to everyone on the panel.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Eve.